Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Process and Automation podcast with the Automation Guys. Are you thinking about setting up a Hyperautomation Center of Excellence? Are you wondering what skills and capacity you need to build? If you like to find out in detail what this means and how to take a cohesive and enterprise-wide approach, this episode is for you. Hello, everyone. My name is Sasha Couture, and also here with me today is Arno von Rooyen, and together we are the Automation Guys. We have planned another exciting episode for you. Today, it's all about hyper automation again. Since we have actually started this podcast, we had a couple of hyper automation stories, and today we will talk about setting up a center of excellence for hyper automation. Arno, do you like to give our listeners a high-level overview what we have planned for this episode?
Yes, of course. Thanks, Sasha, and thanks for all the listeners that are joining. So there's a lot of talk about hyperautomation and the scalability it brings to your business. But I think today's topic is really how to scale automation or hyperautomation in your business by actually establishing a center of excellence. Now, instead of adopting hyperautomation technology, so this is low code, RPA, AI in silos, what we encourage our clients to do is really to take a cohesive enterprise-wide approach to automation. And the establishment of a hyperautomation center of excellence is the recommended way to embed automation very deeply inside your organization, and really to provide the operational guardrails and the guidelines for pilots, productionization of initiatives, the rollout of these initiatives and process automation projects. And then beyond that, the maintenance and support. We always think about hyper automation. A lot of people ask, what the hell is hyper automation? But I think it's really a belief that if anything can be automated inside your business, it should be automated. And I think if this philosophy resonates with you, a hyper automation center of excellence is really an ideal way to embed automation deeply and effectively, inside your business. And also a hyper automation center of excellence, provides you with a springboard to identify and act on the most suitable hyper automation activities inside your business, and also a platform for sharing knowledge and resources for every stakeholder that benefits throughout the hyper automation journey. And this is not just the people that use this or that get the advantage from hyper automation, but it's also everybody in between, the champions that pushes hyper automation, the champions that establishes these initiatives, the champions from above, the stakeholders that invest inside it. So I think it's really important for us today to talk about, how do we establish and deploy a very effective hyperautomation center of excellence. And for those listeners out there that doesn't know what a center of excellence is, it is really just a blueprint or a sort of a digital factory for how we align resources inside a business to establish very good outcomes, predictable outcomes for automation initiatives.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much, Arno. That was a really good introduction. So I guess, as you touched on this earlier, so this episode is really to understand how to establish and deploy that effective hyperautomation center of excellence. And very often, like with other bigger initiatives, it requires really good governance. So the first really important step is to create a change management and governance framework to make hyperautomation work, the center of excellence for hyperautomation work really well. So to maximize the gains and to really get all the benefits of hyperautomation, you need to create that enterprise level governance committee. So so a group of people come together to evaluate all the different process areas across the business, really. So all the different business units, and selecting so the most promising processes in terms of return of investment and scalability.
Yes, exactly. And I think governance is important because this committee actually, it is sort of a feasibility check on the projects that we should let into the hyperautomation initiative sort of world, right? So I always see it as a funnel, right? So there's stuff coming in the left-hand side of the funnel. On the far right-hand side, that's the projects that actually were delivered and provides benefit. So I think this committee is really important to kind of manage that demand pipeline and sort of to set the guidelines, for the assessment of these projects, the design of them, the development and deployment of these solutions. And I think ultimately there's an accountability as well, because if we have got executive sponsorship, there needs to be accountability to executive sponsorship. What are we putting out in terms of promises? What are we investing in terms of resources, and what are we getting out of this? How does it change the lives of people that actually is within inside the business? How to make it better? How do we improve people's lives? And it's all collaboration. I think we always talk about this collaboration between business and IT, but I think this committee's their primary remit, or one of their primary remit, is just to make sure that the sort of cogs between IT and the business is well oiled and people collaborate, right?
And this is, I guess, then a top-down kind of element, isn't it? So it comes from the top executives to come up with that, or to basically initiate that committee, or ask people to set up a committee, or is this just coming out of several departments?
Well, I think the committee itself should have sort of sovereign rights within inside the business. I mean, I always look at this committee as, and don't think about a committee and there's 30 or 50 people in it. I think this is just a select group of people that can have the conversations with executive management as to what direction are we taking, what sort of outcomes are we achieving, what sort of new initiatives are we pushing into the CEO or CoE. What is the sort of things that strategically that we can adopt, and ultimately, what is the direction of travel here? Are we tackling meaningful initiatives, are we solving meaningful problems here? Because of course, if I'm an investor with inside a business in automation, I need to have a go-to person that I can go talk to. So, where are we with things? How are we doing with our automation initiatives? And I think this is, one of the sole kind of purposes of this particular committee. And they need to understand, how do we drive continual development within inside the Centre of Excellence, doing impact assessment on the type of processes we want to automate. And again, like I said earlier, managing the demand pipeline. So if you establish the Centre of Excellence, you might have a pipeline of activity that comes through that you need to prioritize. And I think it's their job to say, well, these are the things that we want to push through because that's in line with our strategy. And these are the things that we can deprioritize. But maybe, in a couple of months or the next quarter of next year, we will look at this.
Okay, so what we hear as well very often is that Centre of Excellence is sort of destroying a bit of the fun, or not necessarily the fun, but sort of slowing down again on this urge of innovation, so that the departments are full of ideas and they want to get going. They want to take Power Automate and want to get going. So then, if they hear about the Centre of Excellence in these departments, they sometimes come back to us and say, "Oh, Are you slowing down us already by putting this in place? What do you think? If you would like to start your career in process and automation, then the Convedo DX IT Graduate Program is for you. Within 4 months, we will give you all the training you need to become a 360-degree full-stack automation developer. After the training, you will be joining exciting client projects to put your new skills into practice. You will learn all about low-code, RPA, process mining, and AI, all based on market-leading technologies from Appian, Blue Prism, Celonis, and many more. If you like the sound of this, head over to cdx.rocks and apply for one of our upcoming cohorts. Should we say to them?
I would say that if your idea is good enough to be adopted within the Centre of Excellence, it would be. And, I think that the role of, this sort of committee is to, and again, this could be day one person, or day, 365, 4 people, but it's their job to choose the initiatives that stand out, that's going to provide those initiatives that would be beneficial to a business. Now, I think what we don't want to do is choke good ideas and airbrush them out. But at the same time, if we have individuals inside a business, inside a department, which is really excited about automation, and we provide a good framework to submit those ideas. If we do it in a very structured way, that's templified, and what I mean by that is we provide them with the right sort of way to document their thoughts as to how to submit these automation requests. I think that the best ones will prevail. The best ones will be chosen. If somebody goes in half-hearted and say, I think I've got an idea here, I think it might work, then if the legwork is not put in as to what the benefits are, what the scope of the project might be, then maybe those ones will lose out. So I think it is all about generating good competition inside a business, and the initiatives that is put forward, that's chosen by this committee, are the ones that people actually thought about. They thought about, what's the sort of impact this will provide to a business, what's the cost savings it will provide, and why it should be first on the list, right? And everybody should always strive to have theirs first on the list.
Yeah, and I guess I think the framework as well established rules like security, isn't it? So I think this is very important as well. So although you might have lots of great ideas, I think security very often might be a thing which is not necessarily looked at because it doesn't sound very innovative and sexy, but it's one very, very crucial part of getting a really good application out there.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there are, unfortunately, some boring governance things that we need to adhere to. I think everybody would like to live in a world where there's no governance, but we all know where that leads, right? So, I think eventually, as your automation initiatives mature, you need to have the governance frameworks around it. And, there needs to be this sort of this group of individual that ensures that we execute correctly and efficiently, and the outcomes that we want to achieve is achieved. We want to make sure that this governance council is prioritizing the projects across the departments and all the functions, so it's implemented in the right priority. You touched on security. I think that's really important because, of course, in everybody's world, security is taken care of by somebody else, in the ether. But I think it's important for somebody to govern that, right? And we've got a lot of governance in our day-to-day life, and I think for this, it doesn't have to be overbearing, but at the same time, it needs to be responsible, so that if a robot does log onto a system and have access to sensitive data, we need to ensure that that data is only accessible or made or presented to people that have got access or should have access to to that data. So I think it's all about establishing this council that we can have the standards, the working principles, the guidelines, and all of the best practices in one place, so everybody understands the rule of engagement. And I know you talked about sort of the sideline of people innovating and doing things on their own. I think that's good, but I think my message would be, take all of that stuff. When you have a center of excellence, presented in such a way that it's easily digested, the benefits are seen pretty easily, and it's submitted forward. So hopefully, when it comes to project selection, it will actually be selected as a project and be put forward for implementation, right?
Absolutely, yeah, and I think very often it's not that easy actually to choose to get started, isn't it? Because very often these technologies we have are very expensive. So I think some committee, someone needs to sort of approve it anyway. And it starts already at selecting the right software product, and can we afford that specific software product? What else can that software product bring us? I think if one department would just think, for example, UiPath or Appian is the right tool, yes, maybe for this one specific use case, but do we want to spend that amount of money for just this one use case, or do we want to maybe use it for more in the business? And I think this is where then the council or the committee comes in, isn't it? To look at the wider opportunities and the wider potential by using these specific products, because there are lots of things to consider. So hyperautomation is looking at the different technologies out there, like AI, RPA, low-code case management, process mining, integration, and analytics. So if you have to consider solutions in all these areas to bring all these technologies together, I think it's really worth having a good view into the market, because you don't want to end up with potentially individual products for each of that. So yeah, it definitely starts there very early on, so that IT and a group of people need to make the right selection.
Yeah.
As well, yeah, and negotiate the best prices on these components.
Yeah, I mean, my view is that the IT team should be exclusively involved in the software selection and the purchasing and all of the negotiations for all of the constituent components. But the operations departments that's going to use these technologies should be consulted during this process. And from a functionality perspective, they should be aware of what these capabilities bring to the table, right? We talk about all of these multiple complementary technologies stacked within hyperautomation, which is, you touch on it, AI, RPA, low code, and case management, process mining. But I think, looking at all of these technologies collectively, there should be good decisions on the ones we choose. And I think from a Hyperautomation Centre of Excellence perspective, we should choose the right tools in our armament, to tackle this problem. Now, day one, it might be that you only adopt RPA. That's fine. But I think as long as you understand that for hyperautomation, we're probably likely to include AI and low-code automation, process mining. That's something that's going to come into the future. So you need to have that awareness when you start procuring the software, and bringing those technologies within inside your business.
Absolutely. So when we look at the software is built, not built, is purchased. So then the real work actually starts for these departments. They actually need to get started on building these applications out and need to understand in depth how to build these applications. Lots of our companies we talk today, they actually struggling to understand what skills are needed. What is so what kind of people do they need if they really want to scale automation within their business? So what do you see, Arno, there as the sort of as the main or the main functions we need to look at putting an Hyperautomation Centre of Excellence in place?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. And, we always talk about, the lack of technical skills when you start automation initiatives. And, one of the remits, of the governance committee, so we spoke about this governance committee that sort of looks at it strategically. We talk about kind of procuring the software. But now if we look at build skills and capacity. So this is actually to be able to execute, to put hands on keyboard to build out these initiatives. This governance committee should also, appoint a hyperautomation operating team. So the operating team is really sort of the mechanics around rolling out automation initiatives. Now, there's a couple of roles that has got accountability, for implementing and managing hyperautomation efficiently with inside the business. And I'll run through a few of those. Now, again, in a real world, from day one, you're not going to have all of these. You might have some role sharing, but if you just look from a role perspective, the kind of the hats people wear. The first one is obviously the sponsor. Who is sponsoring the hyperautomation initiative from a business side? And that's really important. So this is a person that from a sort of enterprise and strategic level looks after executive sponsorship. Somebody has to pay for all of this, and that person needs to be aware of what's the return of investment. The second type of role, what we call is this hyperautomation champions. And, what they do is they evangelize and drive towards hyperautomation adoption, throughout the business. And they ensure there's a healthy pipeline of initiatives. If you're not going to promote this, your pipeline's going to dry up, which.
This was the first part of this episode. Please also listen to part 2 to get the full overview on what is needed to set up a Hyperautomation Centre of Excellence. Unfortunately, that's it again with this episode of the Process and Automation podcast. If you liked this episode, please give us a 5-star rating and don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any upcoming episode. We hope you will tune in next time, and until then, let's automate it.